Hello and welcome to New Consciousness Activation. Today we welcome Masha Levina. Masha, you are a certified clinical nutritionist and a healer. And I'm very excited to have you. So would you like to add more and introduce yourself in more detail?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Masha Levina, and I started my journey as a nutritionist, a certified clinical nutritionist, and later on developed other modalities and healing abilities. So I go beyond nutrition at this point, but a lot of my work focuses on physical well-being. We are here in the physical bodies, and this is an opportunity to create in the physical world. So I learn myself and I teach others how to bring this physical body to the optimum state of being, to the wellness, and to experience joy in the physical body.
Wonderful. So I'm really excited to have you here today because for the past several years, I have especially been focusing on, my connection with the body. And in my work, I find that I really have to incorporate body into whatever work I do. So we can't, I work sort of with a system, with us as, these multiple parts. So focusing on the body is really, for me, one of the important points right now. So I want to start talking to you about sort of the career where you started, right? Nutrition. So especially in America, we have so many ideas about what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, what a perfect diet is, and even people in the spiritual community, we all kind of put ourselves into a certain box and we decide, okay, this is the way to go. No, this is the way to go. No, this is the perfect diet. And some diets focus on very low carbs, some on very low fat, some on, no meat. So I'd like to know what your take is, and is there such a thing as an ideal diet for humans?
Well, I certainly had those questions in mind when I embarked on my journey to become an expert in physical well-being. And when I enrolled into an education in nutritional counseling and nutritional field, I studied all the guidelines and what nutritional components are, the proteins, the vitamins, the minerals, and then I tried to apply those guidelines in life, and I realized that there's more to nutrition than calories and vitamins and minerals. So I started to research for myself beyond what I needed to, beyond the papers that I needed to write, and beyond the scope of certification. So I came to an understanding that nutrition is the best way taken as in the form of whole foods. So the more close nutrition is to the way the nature makes it, the more our body can understand it and take nutrition from it, absorb it. So put it this way, nutrition is information. And the way nature composes and puts this information together is the way our body can understand it the best and utilize it the best. So put it this way, you know about vitamin C or B vitamins, everybody, oh, I should take vitamin C, I just take B complex. In nature, all these things come together as synergistic components. So you don't have ascorbic acid. So in nature, you have vitamin C complex that has lots of components to it. And it might not be a huge amount of ascorbic acid. This is what science calls vitamin C. It might have just a little bit, but the effect, the synergistic effect of that acid plus other components such as rutin and other things make it very potent. So when you take a berry, it has some ascorbic acid, but has lots of other things, and your body will use it in such a way, in a synergistic way, is you get a big benefit from it. So versus a synthetic ascorbic acid in large amount, but by itself. So same thing with B vitamins in whole grains or in animal products. You know, they come together as a whole complex. It's rare that one food only has one B vitamin and another food has a lot of another vitamin. Most of the time, it's a combination of different components that we label as this vitamin, that vitamin. It's in a synergistic effect. Nature doesn't need a lot of one thing. It usually needs a little bit of a lot of things in synergy, and it produces synergistic effect that has the best benefit for the body. So as I was learning about how to become healthy and teach others to be healthy, as I was applying my knowledge with people, what I observed in myself, my family, and my clients is that whole food diet is the best way to go. And since I had a practice and I had a lot of people to observe changes, I also realized that there is an ideal diet, but it's different for everybody. So
Glad you said that.
So an ideal diet for you is not an ideal diet for another person. So the first thing to consider is to choose from whole, unprocessed foods. And the only way you want to process those foods is to enhance the value, such as fermentation, for example. If you take cabbage and turn it into sauerkraut, you will have an enhanced processed food, and it's going to be not denatured, it's going to be enhanced. So whole foods is where you start. And then it depends on what you can absorb. And what you can absorb really depends on your current status of health. A lot of it depends on the microbiome in your intestines, because it's in your intestines that you have all the digestion and absorption of nutrients. So depending on what microorganisms live in your body, in your intestines, you will be able to tolerate some foods or others. So it's not just what ideal to take in, is the question is what you can digest and what you can absorb. So these individual differences play a big role in what's your ideal diet at the moment. And of course, as you improve your health, things change too. So that's why it is so confusing when you're trying to understand what is it that I need. It's not only ideal for you, it's also ideal for you at this time. And things change, seasons, where you live, what's your state of being, what are your demands? Do you have a high stress job, or do you have very physical job, or you have sedentary job? So it's all plays the role. So there is no one answer, and even for one person. And the best way to tune in into that is to develop a relationship with your body. And this is where it gets beyond physical. In other words, you want to have a relationship with your body, but you have to connect to your being so that being can guide you. So this is an interesting process, because you learn how to listen to yourself, and what self are you talking about, right? So, and that self has a physical aspect, an emotional aspect, and mental aspect, and many other aspects. So when you think about, okay, where do I start? You start with taking out processed food. And processed food would be flour instead of eating whole grains, or let's say processed meats instead of whole meats, and processed fats such as refined vegetable oils versus cold pressed oils, or things hydrogenated fat instead of fat as it comes in nature. So you basically just, first step is clean up your kitchen, your cupboards, your fridge from processed food, and you start practicing eating whole foods. So let's say instead of wheat flour, you get whole wheat grain and preferably organic, and then see if you can maybe sprout it and put it overnight on the table in water and see what happens. So if it's an oatmeal, don't get a quick oats, get real oats and cook them and eat them. See how your body responds. So instead of hot dog, go get an organic grass-fed steak and see how your body feels after eating that, what the difference is. So go for unprocessed foods first. And the next step is to see what you digest, what you're able to digest, what you are not able to digest. That's a second thing, and that's individual for each person. So that was my learning experience as I started to practice nutritional counseling. And the biggest responses I saw when people switched from processed food to unprocessed food. A secondary is whether it's only vegetarian or other variations. Another thing I can add is local nutrient-dense food. So in other words, not only whole foods, but where did this food come from? Did it come from a local farm where no mass chemical application was applied, or did it come from a huge farm where lots of chemicals were applied to manage these crops? Did it come from nutrient-dense soil that produces nutrient-dense plants? Did the animals go outside? Did they graze on grass, or were they inside and were fed things that not necessarily processed food themselves?
Right.
Were these animals treated with medications because medications will end up in the meat and milk and or eggs. So you want to also make sure it's a clean whole food, and it's also nutrient dense whole food. So that's another very important factor. All other things come next. So first, whole foods, clean foods, nutrient dense foods.
So I want to go back for a second to the meat and whether, and explain why I said I'm so happy that you said, that there is really no ideal diet, that it's ideal to ourselves, because we have been taught to follow the standard that's good for, that there is a standard that's set for the entire country. You have to eat this much of this and this much of that. And we have not been taught to really use our body as a being that can communicate to us and that can tell you what's really best for us. But I want to add another dimension to that. I have heard some of the information that I got from channeled information, specifically through a being called Cryon, is that what's ideal for us can also be determined by our Akashic memories and our Akashic records, that in other expressions of ourselves in other lives, when we have lived in a particular place, and sometimes we stay in the same geographical location for a number of lifetimes. And if that was a particularly favorable location, or the foods that we were eating there were favorable to our health or being, whatever, then we come into this life with a memory of those foods, or memory, that works for us. So like, for example, somebody who lives, let's say, in America, but loves sushi, like loves Japanese food, and that's the diet, like rice and fish is their diet. So instead of us judging, you're not a vegetarian or you are a vegetarian, or judging whatever it is that somebody else is eating, we really only need to go inside and possibly connect with our Akashic, memory, and see what is it that's favorable to us. As much as you said, in terms of whether it's whole food, whether it's clean, whether what's right for us at this time, what we can process, but also what do we bring from our long distance memory, possibly. So I'd like to know what your thoughts on that are.
Well, as I explored beyond the physical, I came to understanding how many factors play in our choices, what governs our decisions and emotions and preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, memory is definitely stored in the space-time continuum. And I do agree with the notion, it's just how I experience things too, that our soul has different projection in the space-time continuum and we experience this different lifetimes. I can't tell you I'm an expert on all the details around it, but it does seem to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Drawing from the non-physical realm, um, although it is physical because it is embedded in the space-time continuum, and our physical is an extension of that, from my
Mm-hmm.
understanding, which seems to be congruent with what you're talking about.
Right.
So the information is always embedded, and you draw on that information. So your being that have an experience in the physical body in this lifetime has memories of your soul all other lifetimes. Yes, you can draw on those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes fun because you don't know where it came from. And
Right.
then all of a sudden you realize, oh, a different lifetime. What does that mean, right? And it gets very interesting. But without getting exotic and just staying even on a level, you know, if you haven't explored spirituality and information beyond the physical experience,
Right.
you can see that we have this preference to different foods, and genetically programmed for something. Some people will benefit from getting protein from animal sources and more fish than
Mm-hmm.
land animals, and other people will no problem digesting red meat, and they will have no health issues, where other people will prefer to get their protein from vegetable sources. There's populations in different places where people generation after generation kept mostly vegetarian diet, and they have
Mm-hmm.
no problem getting everything out of vegetables. And if you place a person from Europe to, let's say, India, where it's mostly vegetarian, this person will have a very hard time getting all the nutrition from lentils and other plants. And the same thing, if you put somebody from the area where there's only vegetables and beans available to middle of Midwestern America, whereas traditionally people eat steak, you know, it's going to be very difficult for that person to, you know, eat that diet. So yes, there is a genetic memory. So it's your body basically programmed. It can change, but it takes a long time.
Right.
And it'll change with the next generation. But the memory of your different lifetimes can certainly be part of it. But my question is, what if you have a memory of a different planet lifetime?
That would be difficult. And you know, there are people who really feel like they don't fit in this life. You know, it's really hard for them to just find to sort of blend in into this life. So there, you know, there are all kinds of experiences we have. But I think the main thing for me in my work is to help people really get in touch with their own wisdom and really learn from them. And of course, working with someone like you know, that can definitely help them ask the right questions and get the right information. But my main focus is separating them from sort of the nationally established standards, you know,
Yeah.
and instead look within and look for the answers that are there. And so I want to focus, speaking of nationally established standards. So for example, right now, all public schools are directed to use low-fat milk as the milk that's given to children. Can you talk about the, you know, the low-fat versus whole whole food. I know you've already talked about whole food, but specifically about the low fat.
Yes. Well, let's start with milk. Uh, from the get-go, we've simplified low fat or whole fat milk, and this is about 1/5 of the story about the milk. So let's just look at the milk in general. So let's say 150 years ago. So here is a little farm, and animal is whether it's a cow or a goat, or different countries, you know, camel. So animal that produces milk, and people take that milk for consumption. You have an animal that is outside and grazing. These are grazing animals, right? So they're grazing grass, and they're picking up bugs that live there, and they're also taking all the soil particles and microbes that live there, and all kinds of vegetation, and you know, they do take little bugs in, so that would be animal protein they're taking in too.
Mm-hmm.
So they are outside, and they're exposed to the sun and different weather conditions, natural water, natural rain. So this is an animal that is healthy and eats a variety of food and produces one certain kind of milk. So, and then you take that milk and you drink, and you got all the nutrients. It's a very, very nutrient dense food. And if the animal is healthy, then this is a healthy milk. Now, let's take a look at the modern animal that we take the milk from. So let's just go to the most available cow's milk. So if you take a standard, just a gallon of milk, just here's your whole milk or low fat milk, where does it come from? Well, if it doesn't have a label organic, that it means comes from animals that are most of the time live on crowded farms, and they're not always exposed to outside in the sun. And most of the time, because these are large farms, they have to be injected with antibiotics to keep the infections down, and their food is grain, which is not the original diet of grass grazing animals. They also, at this point, a lot of large farms use hormones to stimulate milk production so that the farmer can get more milk. So these animals are exposed to a lot of antibiotics, hormones. They don't eat optimal diet, so they don't see outside a lot. They're a lot of times in a crowded condition. So it's a completely different animal. They have completely different milk. So we're starting, okay, from two different milks. There is not a comparison in the fat content, protein content. The bacterial count is different. So you already have two different materials. So we're not even talking about the same milk. And the next comes pasteurization and homogenization. So pasteurization kills bacteria, which is great. You're not getting bacteria, the animal is infected. So you heat up the milk and you don't get the infection. Great. The only problem is that the milk is now, the protein is denatured and the fat is oxidized, because if you expose fat to heat, it becomes rancid. All right, so we've got now several problems. On top of that, if you take the milk that is not homogenized, the fat will rise to the top. So homogenization produces even fluid, even milk, and it looks good, but the fat has to be more oxidized because it goes through the mash to make it all very small molecules of fat. So now we have pasteurized, homogenized, non-organic milk from animals that have been subjected to some chemicals, some food that's not ideal, some hormones, some antibiotics. So we have not only two different products, we have now extremely processed milk. Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, you now start taking the fat away. So the natural synergistic effect of the original product also changes. So at this point, it's a highly undigestible food. And whereas the first scenario, you have milk that used to be something that people would take to heal colds and flus. Now, all of a sudden, if you take it, you're filled with mucus. So we're talking about completely two different things. So it's not even a question about low fat or whole milk. It's a question about where does this milk come from. So you want to limit or eliminate consumption of processed milk because it's hard to digest and doesn't have nutritional value, and it also may be loaded with pesticides and hormones and residual antibiotics. So that's what the problem is. So so if you want to give your child milk, I would say connect to local farmer. Or in some states it is legal to get raw milk. In most states it's not. So you basically at least do whole milk, pasteurized but not homogenized, and from smaller farms as much as possible. Another really great way to use milk is in a fermented form, such as yogurt, plain yogurt from organic whole milk, or kefir, or even raw milk cheese. So it is not easy for a lot of people to digest milk products once you become an adult, but small amounts of the right kind could still be good.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So let's talk about sugar.
Yes.
Sugar, I consider sugar the biggest drug on this planet. There's the highest degree of addiction to it because it's so widespread. I mean, pretty much most people are addicted. So there are, of course, sugar substitutes that are that we're told are better, that they help us lose weight and things like that. So what's your take on sugar, the substitute versus natural?
Sure. So let's think about where sugar comes from. There are two sources that are most common is beets or cane juice or cane plant. So here's your cane plant, and you press it and you squeeze the juice out of it, and it's brown and it's juice and it's rich in minerals and vitamins and enzymes. Okay, then the next step, you want to get to that white, nice powder, right? So the next step is you take all the minerals and you take the brown light, you take all the molasses and all that stuff out, right? And you get to more refined, more just powder that's mostly glucose and things that turn into glucose like right away. So you bleach it so it's white, and you have a beautiful white powder that looks good and tastes good, except it has 0 minerals and 0 vitamins, and it is now no enzymes, of course, because it's been heated up, and it may also contain some residue of this refining stuff, whatever agents were used. Also, let's say if the original sugar came from crops that were maybe modified or breeded to a certain kind, or even genetically modified, then you also have a problem there. So then you have this white powder that has, it turns into glucose in your bloodstream almost instantaneously, and a small concentration, a teaspoon, raises your blood sugar dramatically right away. So if you had the original cane juice, a teaspoon of that original cane juice, your body would process it without a problem. Now, refined and refined and refined and refined, it is a problem. So when I was traveling to Peru, when we had to go high altitude, you go to Midway and you stay to acclimatize, and local people offer you cocoa leaves, right? So there is some substances there, and as cocoa leaves, you know, yes, there's a cocaine present in there, but it's diluted with all the other things that are in cocoa leaves. and you have no effect other than you're more relaxed. You have to really chew it, you breathe better. So there's so many effects that are wonderful. But if you take and press all these leaves and get cocaine out of that, that would be really fun, and you can die from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could certainly have a very dramatic effect on the body. So refining and taking one substance out of its context makes it completely different. And yes, in the case of sugar and in the case of cocaine, they're very addictive. And there was a study done on mice to see what they would prefer, refined sugar or cocaine, and they went for sugar. So
Absolutely, it's a more addictive drug.
yes. So the body can tolerate certain amount of sweets, because to the body it's just carbohydrates, and they all turn into glucose. And then if it's a complex carbohydrate, then you have some fiber, you have some enzymes, you have some vitamins and minerals, and your body takes all of it, right? And then uses glucose to generate energy, to fuel our brain and things like that. But it also have all those synergistic minerals and vitamins to actually utilize the energy, because although energy metabolism does require glucose, but it requires minerals and vitamins to run that. So this fuel by itself is not what generates energy. It's the complex of things, right? So we think like, of course we need glucose for brain, it feeds the brain, but it's the B vitamins and minerals that run the cycle to actually make it happen. So, it's not the whole picture. So let's say if you want to use some sweeteners, whole food sweeteners would be your preference, such as maple syrup or raw honey or raw agave, but it's small amounts. And since we've been, as a civilization, human civilization, indulging in refined sugar for so long, most of us has very low tolerance for sugar. So consuming refined sugar is a problem, and the best way to get off is to go unrefined. So let's say start eating unrefined cane juice, organic, and then maybe go into raw honey or raw maple, liquid stevia, high quality that you can, the highest quality you can get. So you need to unrefine your sweet intake. And even fruit has a lot of fructose, and it's also pretty sweet, and it's hard to deal with for a person who's been been abusing sugar for a long time and not able to handle sugar metabolism.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you. So I want to begin to switch to another subject, but I want to ask if you want to add anything else about nutrition as we think about, so the focus of our conversations here is about helping people as we activate our consciousness, as we take steps towards the evolution of our consciousness, which is not something that's going to happen, in a week or even a year. It's a very long process. But as we're moving further and further into that evolution, what are the foods, or what can support us better? I mean, you already, of course, addressed, whole foods and becoming aware of where they come from and what we can process at the time, and going unrefined. Anything else you want to add?
Yes. I want to talk about cleaning the body. It is very difficult for us to function in a polluted environment, and our environment is highly polluted. I'm just going to show you something. This is a book that I found, and it has 2,300 pages, and it's basically a list of all research chemicals. It's a thick book.
Wow.
All research chemicals and metals and materials used in the industry. So our industry gives us a lot of great technological advances and conveniences, but it comes with a toxic load. So in our environment right now, there's a lot of chemicals and heavy metal pollution, and also radioactive pollution. So the body is burdened by that. And in order for our cells to communicate with other cells, so it's all about cellular communication. Your health is the health of your cells. And if the cells cannot communicate due to heavy metal and chemical pollution, you start losing your health. So foods that are great for your, it's not necessarily for, it is for your spiritual process, but more for feeling well while you're going through your expansion, and having energy to support the changes and shifts and expansion of your consciousness. It's great to have a clean body. So keeping the body clean, a lot depends on vegetables and green stuff. All right. So yes, let's say things that come from animals, they're very nutrient dense and they have a lot of minerals and essential fatty acids, and there's lots of value in there, essential fatty acids that are necessary for the nervous system and all the cells in your body. But the best way to get clean is to use a lot of vegetables in your diet. A salad a day and lots of green leafy vegetables, and even maybe in supplemental form, put some in your shake, herbs, dried and fresh herbs, really great. Some herbal tinctures to help your body keep up with a load of to get the chemicals and metals out of the body. So all your organs can use support to get the pollution out. So I would just say that it's very important to go through cleanses. All right. So for those times, let's say if you're not a vegetarian, if you eat animal products and you feel great and it agrees with you, make space for periods of time when you go vegetarian and just clean up. It doesn't have to be long, just periodic, so that the body can purge.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about another very exciting area of your work, and that's called multidimensional transformation. And I'll let you just introduce this to our listeners and just tell us more about it.
Great. Well, multidimensional transformation is a system of healing that uses consciousness as a primary tool. So everything is viewed as information and vibrational frequencies, and the information is organized in fields, and we can with our consciousness, with our ability to consciously perceive information and interpret that, we can connect to any field of information and get information from that. And same way to exchange information with it. So there's a growing number of physicists that are exploring the consciousness, the element of consciousness, or the notion that consciousness is part of everything. So you can't really throw it out of physical equations. And they look at consciousness as an exchange, the feedback loop mechanism. So the way I came to using consciousness technology, which is using your ability to perceive information, exchange information, it came from my quest for first my physical health, and then looking for what are the ingredients for the joyful experience of life. So first I mastered the physical, and I realized that there's more to it. I realized that if you experience some negative emotion, all of a sudden, no matter what you ate, you will not feel good, or you will not be able to digest.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter if you had your nutrient-dense food, you will
Right.
feel unnourished. So there's this emotional aspect of our being. And then there's also our perception of things, our beliefs, how we look at things, and why do we choose certain perspectives. And then there's also psychic ability to perceive information, which is you can't really even understand it or explain it. It comes in signs or visions, and before your logical mind can explain it, you already know it and feel it and connect with it. So, and of course, there's some people who have extraordinary abilities to see auras and see into different lifetimes, and it gets more and more exotic and fun. So my journey was first to get the most out of life for myself, and then I started applying it in my practice. So as I was studying nutrition, I studied muscle testing, which is ability of our nervous system to conduct information. And through muscle, you connect to the nervous system, and that gives you answers about the body. And then I learned that it gives you answers not just about your body, but what you store in your emotional profile, and also what you store in your mind definitions or beliefs. So I started to use muscle testing as a guide for accessing emotional and mental databases. And then I realized that a lot of times as you practice, you can get direct knowing or vision. So as you open one door, you're led to another door and another door. And I studied with a lot of people. I studied a wonderful consciousness technology system called Matrix Energetics. It was a lot of fun. And that gave me an understanding of the technology, consciousness technology. Also, I studied Psyche, which was about understanding of how the mind creates, mind definitions create emotions and how to work with that. And I worked with a lot of techniques such as total body modification and how to use muscle testing for nutritional understanding the nutritional needs of the body. And all of this knowledge gave me an understanding of what aspects are there, and also how to connect to these aspects. And then I let go of all these tools and I started getting information directly. So at first, I would introduce my clients to this tool or that tool, and at the end, I pretty much started to blend everything. And one day, I realized that I have a system at work because I start channeling in my own tools, and these are basic core tools of multidimensional transformation, and it's still growing, not maybe as fast as it was at the beginning, but I have tools that are pretty much a set of commands, and when I have an opening, I can pretty much give a permission for certain changes to occur, and the field opens up and the information exchange happens, although I'm not touching anybody. Things such as heavy metals get cleaned up from the body, or
Say it again, I'm sorry. Say it again, having what cleaned up? There was a disruption.
Oh, sure. Things such as heavy metal storages in the body can be cleaned up. I had a very interesting case recently when a client came in and I detected radioactive metals in her body. And I was able to clean them just by giving commands. Again, these are tools and they work on a conscious level, but they immediately resonate with the physical body. And a week later, she called me and she said that she was at the airport and she went through a metal detector and she didn't set it off. And she used to set off metal detectors, so she didn't know why. So she had metal stored in her body. She was exposed to it somewhere and her body retained them. So that just cleaned up. And I never touched the person. It's just the commands within the multidimensional transformation allow for these permissions they're like permit commands or permission slips, to do that work. So
And
that's
so,
the
so let
power. Mhm.
so let me ask you. So when you give these commands, these are commands to the body, or to the energy, or to the higher self, or to who are you commanding?
Yes, so let's start from how this whole thing works. The way I understand it is that everything is interconnected and organized in fields, and all these fields are within a unified field. So all these different fields of information sort of like comprise the whole, right? So, and within the whole, everything is absolutely always interconnected and exchanging energy. And also there is a holographic, holofractographic nature of the universe, of our reality, where within each small space of time, every information holographically present. So there's a potential of the whole universe in every little, well, put it this way, in every little proton. So there is an emerging field of physics. It's called unified physics, by Nassim Haramein, and he has a online university. It's called resonance.is. So he's teaching about how it looks geometrically and mathematically, what we're talking about, but pretty much he explains that in each point, the information about the whole entire universe is present. This way we can access this information. So when you connect to another person, so let's say I want to connect to you, first I am connecting to your center, to the center of your being, right? And then I get a permission whether I'm allowed to interact, right? We're all connected anyway, but I get a permission to interact. And if I get a permission, then I can start going through feedback loop, finding out what is it that you want to interact with, right? So in other words, I don't impose anything, but I'd rather put inquiries is what would be beneficial for you to know, what would be beneficial for you to change, what would be beneficial for you to learn, and things like that, right? So, and your being, we can call it higher self, we can call it inner knowing, we can call that your spiritual being, but the being that has aspects, not your physical body, not your mind, but your being that has all these aspects.
Right.
That's the being I am interacting with. And information is stored, and different information is stored in different fields, but they all belong to your being, right? So you in charge. And I'm merely getting that information on a screen, so to speak, so I can take a look at it and then see what is it that would be beneficial to change or look at or shift. So the process is made possible by the fact that everything is connected always at all times. And why some things can be changed is because it is in that person's best interest to do so. And the commands that I've gotten are like permission slips, okay? So in other words, you may not be able to give yourself that permission, but I am giving you permission to clean up heavy metals from your body at this point. It's very interesting how it all works. I can't tell you that I can tell you exactly all the details, but I have a general idea of energy flow and interaction between information. So put it this way, if it's safe and appropriate for you to clean up a deposit of heavy metal in your body, then you can go ahead and do it. But if that would facilitate a change that's not good for you, I will not be permitted to do that.
Right.
Also, if your being wants to experience a disease and use that disease as an excuse not to do something, then I cannot really help you.
Right.
So here's the mind and emotion also playing a role. And what is your journey? Maybe your journey is to experience, I want to do it all myself. So then you will not let anybody do it for you. Maybe then your journey is to explore a little bit of negative emotions and negative definitions. From the spiritual perspective, these are just explorations. These are just so the commands allow me to do certain things when your being says, I'm okay with that.
So that's very interesting. I want to, what kind of, I had a question about was when you said that you may not give yourself permission to do something, but I can give you permission. So can you clarify that? Like, in other words, if a person were to connect through some sort of meditative or guided practice to connect with their own wisdom, because I think what you're really connecting is with is that, you know, being's wisdom on, you know, in whatever different aspects it is, right? So if we each were to learn to connect with that wisdom, would we be able to give ourselves such permissions?
Absolutely. Yes, you don't need anybody else to give you permission. All you have to understand is why you're not giving yourself permission and where is it coming from? Is it coming from, I don't want to know all the answers because it's not fun. I'd like to be in the dark a little bit, you know, I want to play the game. I don't want to be omnipotent. I want to experience my limited worldview. That's fine. Or is it because I don't believe that I am powerful?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't believe I can do it, but there's this famous healer who can do it and only he can do it, you know, then you will not give yourself permission to do it, but you will give permission to another person, right? That is why I prefer to teach people what I do, because I see the most joy in people are able to give themselves permission to experience fun, prosperous life, healthy life, expanded abilities, you know, opening their gifts and bringing the creative aspects their own way. But these are the tools that I can teach anybody. We all can do it, and that's where the fun starts.
Right. So I know you teach classes, you teach people to do those things. Do you have any interesting cases or interesting stories about what people have been able to accomplish or change or heal?
Let's see. My my favorite one is a lady who first got introduced to my work about, I guess, 10 years ago. And this is when I really just started to establish things and was doing a lot of nutrition. So she learned about nutrition. And then as I opened other aspects and gifts, you know, she wanted to learn that. So at this point, she's 75. She just had her 75 year's birthday. And she says that I am the healthiest, the happiest, and the most powerful being I've ever been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So every day, so she started, she was on several medications and she was doing well, but struggling with a couple of things. So by eating well and switching to natural foods and introducing some herbs and nutritional supplements, she was able to clean up her body. And then her doctor saw that her blood work was fine and she didn't need to take any more medications. And then she started going into nature, and she goes to waterfall every day, and she does 1,000 steps up and down. And then she stands on top of the highest platform in the waterfall, and she does her energy work every day, and she communicates with nature beings there, and she's completely free of any health issues, and she's leading a very productive life at 75, very, very active. Let's see, there's many cases. Just had a master class workshop with 13 people going to the master level. That means I've been practicing it every day, and they've been practicing every day. So people's jobs change, people's relationships change for the better. Physical, definitely, so many healing stories where people not only feel better, but resolve long-term health problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the 75-year-old woman who is now feels the most powerful, the most healthy, and the most joyful, I think this is my best case. So, you know, is afraid to age, and you know, and you don't have the same flexibility and freedom, and she's dreaming about going on more traveling around the world now. That's her next aspiration. She just came back from Mexico, from the
Wow.
pyramids. So yeah, that's something to look forward to.
Absolutely. Just to show that that's our potential. We don't have to be sick, or we don't have to, age and get and just fall apart. It's
Yes.
really all within our power. Now, and you do consultations and your work remotely as well as in person. Is that right?
Because again, you can access the informational field from anywhere to anywhere. It's pretty much, similar to internet. I mean, you just dial www and you go to that address. Same thing. You can. So yes, whoever is nearby, they come to my office, and whoever cannot, it's just a connection on Skype and video programs, and just the same thing.
Okay.
I also hold classes.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I want to talk to you about as we wrap up. What are you up to these days? And I know you're offering a wonderful, generous free gift to people, a free session, right?
Yes. Yes.
So would you like to talk about where people will have your website address, but what else they can find, when they connect with you?
Sure. The website is multidimensionaltransformation.com. It's a long name, I know it, and it's actually just came to me that the name will be changing, but the link will work. I am transforming myself all the time, so I'm not holding on to anything as it comes. I shift. But typically during my sessions, there is a large amount of information people have about themselves, about their physical body, about their emotional profile, about what are their blocks to their own gifts. Mm-hmm. So what their creative spark is, what they're not seeing that would help them to be the best they can be.
Right.
So, this information will come with lots of also how to do and recommendations about how to take charge of anything in your life, how to take charge of your health, how to take charge of your emotions, how to understand emotions and not judge them, but use them as a navigation into your subconscious mind, and how to look at your prism, at your perspective, at your mind definitions, and how to change that, and therefore your relationship with yourself and the world.
Right. Well, Masha, thank you. Wow, your work is so valuable. I so much appreciate that you were here to talk to us and to share this wisdom. And really, from my perspective of systemic thinking, I think what you're doing is really highlighting that that complete interconnection and complexity of all these different aspects that we're working with, and how powerful they are when they connect and work with each other, and how disempowering they can be if we break them apart and sort of take one little thing in isolation. So thank you for your conversation, for your wisdom, and for everything you do, and please continue doing it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity for me to share my wisdom and my work. And yes, this work is valuable for humanity, and more people are exploring this sort of work. And luckily, unfortunately, our wonderful scientists are coming to the understanding that spirituality and physics are one. It's not separate.
Yes, it's about time, right? Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.